Здравствуйте, is that?
Good afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really sorry and confused not to be able to speak Russian. So as you said, my name is Xavier Heusghem and I am a marketing director for Niagara Kudelski Group, which is a Swiss company specializing in multi-screen digital television and content protection. This company is a founding member of the HBBTV consortium, and this morning, or this afternoon, I will not speak as a representative of Niagara. We have others in the room, and there will be a presentation later in the afternoon. But I will speak on behalf of the HBBTV consortium only. So the purpose of this presentation is to... by the way, before starting, I have a question. Who considers today to be familiar or well-knowing HBBTV? Don't be shy, raise your hands. Okay, so the purpose of the presentation is to clarify, and it seems that it's a very good opportunity, HBBTV. So what it is, what are the building blocks of HBBTV, how does it work, what does it bring, because finally this is what is interesting, and a few examples of application of the HBBTV standard. Before that, what I would like to do is to spend a few minutes to make sure that we agree on what we mean by interactive television, what it is. And I think there was some very interesting presentation earlier this morning trying to describe what is or what will be interactive television. I'd like to also open the discussion, maybe not to debate here, but afterwards during the lunch, why do we need a standard for interactive television? And after having dived a bit into HBBTV, I would like to give you a quick update on the evolution of the HBBTV standard, where we are, what can we expect from the standard. And also another important topic is to speak about adoption. Is HBBTV used? Who is using HBBTV and where? And of course, I'll finish with a few information on the HBBTV forum itself, but very quick, and some conclusions to trigger some discussions and questions for afterwards and for during the lunch. So, interactive television, if we think about what it meant, let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was mainly about being able to display on television sets some information about weather forecast, traffic, meteo alerts, and that type of things, like teletext did, by the way, mainly delivered under the form of text and basic graphics. Today, as it was very well described in an earlier presentation, by interactive television, we mean personalized television services, and especially, yes, of course, it can use broadcast channels, but especially taking advantage of the growing availability and cheaper price of broadband connection. So it's really about personalized services. Another important thing is that as you start speaking about interactive television, you open another door, which is the fact that viewers, consumers, or subscribers, once they have interactivity on their TV sets, they will of course like to have it also on their other devices, tablets, mobile phones, PCs, etc., etc. What it means is that as soon as you open the door of interactive television services, you also open the door of multi-screen, multi-device services, which is an important thing. So interactive television is more than having your TV sets connected to internet, but again, it's about personalized services, and services is about TV channel, programs, on-demand content, and that type of things. And as we say, and as it was mentioned earlier this morning, we consider interactive television as a chance for viewers to move between mass audience and real personalized services without having to leave their living room. So why having a standard for interactive television services? It could be a big debate. But basically, if we try to go quickly through that, it always helps for new services to roll out if there is a standard, of course. That's been proven in the history of many technological environments. Service providers, in the wide sense of it, of course, will have their life easier if there is a standard to make sure the service runs on multiple devices and platforms. Consumer electronics vendors, of course, will be very happy to see standards to make sure, and that's the other way around, their devices will support many services. The CE industry overall will be very happy to have standards to make sure that their devices and equipment will reach, I would say, a sufficient volume of business to realize economies of scale. There has been several attempts of standards for interactive television in the past. That does not really work well for many reasons. Reasons could be the technology was not ready to support these standards or initiatives. Another reason could be that the business model behind was not strong enough to push the events of such initiatives. And also, as I said earlier, even if interactive television can rely on broadcast only, taking the advantage of broadband connection brings a lot of value. And of course, as I said earlier, the availability of high quality and the price of high quality broadband networks is more and more a reality. So diving into the topic of this presentation, what is HBBTV? So first of all, what does it mean? I think everybody knows it, but just in case, HBBTV stands for Hybrid Broadcast Broadband Television. So it says what it does. It favors the smooth integration of broadcast and broadband services. Before going a bit more into the details, what is HBBTV and what HBBTV is not? So HBBTV is that's important, a business-neutral technology platform. I will speak afterwards about the HBBTV consortium and the HBBTV standard, but basically it's the result of the cooperation between broadcasters, content owners, content providers, CE equipment vendors, etc., etc. It is applicable, and that's very important to mention that, to any kind of broadcast and broadband networks. We hear a lot about HBBTV for terrestrial television, for example, but HBBTV works, of course, very well with satellite and cable television and with any kind of broadband networks. The HBBTV standard allows for broadcast mode only. It means that you can create or enable interactive television with broadcast only, without broadband, but it might lead to some constraints in terms of the sort of service we can provide and also in terms of bandwidth. But it works. HBBTV mainly specifies or deals with the equipment or the user device side, not with what is happening on the back-end side. And we will see that more in details. It allows to maintain the integrity of broadcast services in the sense where it allows to, as I said earlier, integrate broadband services with broadcast services while keeping the viewer in a control or specified environment. I'll clarify that point a bit later in the presentation. HBBTV is not a completely specified ecosystem, otherwise that would be too constraining and not adapted. So it is, and I will come through that as well, it relies or it specifies a few important building blocks, but it doesn't specify everything. For example, it doesn't specify how you, when I say you, it's broadcasters, content providers, or application developers, it doesn't specify how to implement it in details. It, for example, does not specify when you think about content protection or security, which DRM you have to use. So it means that it lets the door open to implementation, which, by the way, will very often be local. So what we see is that the HBBTV standards is in different countries implemented a bit differently for some specific features. And it's not only applicable to broadcasters. Yes, it is very suitable for broadcasters, but a lot of content providers or network providers are using HBBTV. Before, or not to be too theoretical and too complex and too boring, let's have a quick look of what can, and that's an example, what can HBBTV bring in terms of user experience in the broadcast environment, for example, because that's probably where it's the easiest to highlight HBBTV value proposition. So you are watching live television, for example, on your connected TV. So sorry, I am coming from Switzerland and I play tennis, so maybe some of you will not like this picture. So just imagine that you have a brand new connected TV or a TV with an HBBTV set-top box connected to it. You are watching to a live stream coming from either satellite or cable or terrestrial television. HBBTV allows to, and I will go as well into the details, to use some specificities of a broadcast signal to send some information to a broadband-capable device, or not, by the way, to enable and activate some broadband services. On many applications, it takes the form of a pop-up which comes to the user that allows to enable broadband services, such as, for example, the red button that you are all hearing about in interactive television services offered by broadcasters. Okay, so what happens thanks to HBBTV is that according to a standard technology, your equipment, without any modification, will, when you press that red button or when you do any other action which is decided by the service provider, will allow to enable the broadband connection of your device to access interactive services. So interactive services can be, for example, it's an example of a Spanish broadcaster. It can be free catch-up services, for example. So all the application that you see here around the live stream which is kept has been downloaded by the broadband connection of your connected TV using a URL that has been sent by the broadcast signal. This is HBBTV, and this is what we mean by smooth integration of broadband and broadcast services. Then you are in the interactive environment, mostly broadband-based, and you can have access to any services. So again, the example here is a free catch-up service offered by a broadcaster. So you can, of course, still have some advertising. You can browse through some content, through some catch-up assets. You can even imagine, and I will speak about that afterwards, that some of this content is pay content to enable monetization or alternative revenue sources for content providers and some broadcasters when it's possible. Okay, so you can select an asset. Prior to that, the content providers can decide to send some advertising. You have access to the asset. All this through the broadband connection of your TV set. You can watch the asset, have some advertising, go full screen. You are doing over-the-top television once you're using that type of services. Okay? And you can go back to the live stream. So it's a quick example which shows one of the things which is possible to do with HBBTV. Okay, so you are watching live TV, you are watching broadcast channel, and you can have access to interactive services thanks to a standard technology. So what does it bring business-wise, HBBTV? Again, smooth integration of broadband and broadcast services. You saw this through the quick example, but I will show you some other examples afterwards. So it allows to smoothly integrate broadband services with your broadcast channels, which allows to, of course, offer interactivity or interactive television services through appealing experiences for users, because finally the important here is consumers and viewers. So thanks to HBBTV, which is based on several technologies, but one of them is CE-HTML, you can build and integrate appealing services for your users. And as I said earlier, it opens many monetization opportunities, offering new services, of course, and hopefully can generate revenues. So it can be free, for example, free advertising-based catch-up services for broadcasters. It can be paid television services for pay TV service providers, or it can even be a hybrid of both, which is allowing some broadcasters to monetize some content, for example, archives or some content for which they have the rights. So it's really important because HBBTV allows to enable new business model. Thinking about it, HBBTV has lots of advantage for all the players within the ecosystem. So broadcasters, as I said earlier, you can offer new services to your users, free advertising-based or why not paying services. Content providers, of course. Connected TV vendors can, of course, have benefits from the HBBTV standard. It means that it allows them to offer directly to their customers some services, interactive services based on a standard technology. So you see, for example, on the, I'm not supposed to mention vendors, but if you look at the TV sets, connected TV sets from the main vendors, they can offer HBBTV services to access to, internet, television services, gaming, social networks. All this thanks to HBBTV. And of course, as I said earlier, network operators, pay TV service providers can also take advantage of HBBTV in Europe, especially in Germany, for example. There are some pretty good examples of pay TV service providers using HBBTV to offer new services. And of course, it can also be used for device independence services, not linked to any broadcast channel, just to give access to applications from HBBTV capable devices. Okay? Some examples of things that you can do with HBBTV, there's a lot of things, but it could be, for example, broadcast channels who wants to launch local TV services. So HBBTV can then use to offer the viewers with the access to local services, which could include live, video on demand, free or pay content. Completely different application. HBBTV can also be a very good solution to offer value-added services, for example, on TV channels or on content providers' services, to offer services such as bigger text or more visible information for people having viewing problems, or using HBBTV to stream using the broadband connection of your connected TVs, some sign language for people having hearing problems. So just an example of a few applications that can rely on HBBTV, and again, it's standard. So speaking a bit about the standard itself, it looks very technical and boring, and it can be, but I'll try to make it short and understandable. It is to highlight the fact that from the beginning, HBBTV relies on standard, already existing building blocks. For example, the first version of HBBTV, 1.0 or 1.1, which was released in June 2010, if I'm right, is relying on well-known services, especially for the signaling of the HBBTV services. It relies on the digital video broadcast standard, the same for video compression. It relies on the Consumer Electronic Association, I think it's represented here in the audience, for standards like CE-HTML. So HBBTV relies on CE-HTML, which allows for appealing application and services. It also relies on some technologies and standard or pieces of standard from the Open IPTV forums, for example, content protection or some compression format. And it also relies on the World Wide Web Consortium for some other technologies. The current version of the HBBTV standard, which is the version 1.5, which was released, I think, in April this year, integrates some new important features, also relying on standard. These features are, I'm sure it's a topic that you've been hearing of for quite a while. HBBTV 1.5, again the current version, now supports MPEG-. What is MPEG-? MPEG- is basically a standard which standardized, let's say, adaptive bitrate technologies. In other terms, it really allows for standardized streaming to any sort of device, adapted to the resolution of the device and the bandwidth to which this device is connected. Said an easier way, it opens the door for real high-quality content on multiple devices, television set, tablets, mobile phones, PCs, etc., etc. So now the HBBTV standard, that's very important. Remember, I spoke about multi-screen services earlier. That really opens the door to multi-screen interactive television services. The second thing which HBBTV 1.5 supports, it's about content protection. So some of you will say, content protection's no interest for me. Okay. Content protection, finally, is about monetization. When you want to start using content coming from content providers and sometimes sell this content, you need to protect your content, to securize your content. HBBTV now supports another standard coming from the ISO, which is called, CHENK, Common Encryption. It allows for the management of multiple DRM. So I'm sure you all know what DRM is. In television services, it means technologies to protect the content, to make sure that the people looking at the content have the rights to do it. So for those thinking about using HBBTV services to enable new monetization models based on, for example, selling content, it is very important that this standard for interactive television now allows for content protection. And it is important that you can support many DRMs. Why? Because unfortunately, some devices, if you think about multi-screen services on many devices, you will have to deal with several content protection technologies. So forget the complexity of this diagram and remember that HBBTV is a standard which now supports, of course, and I'm repeating what I said earlier, smooth integration of broadcast and broadband services, but also important features such as adaptive streaming to any sort of devices and content protection when it is required. Okay? So just, I mentioned that earlier, but a bit of history. So the first version of HBBTV was released in June 2010, and by the way, this is exactly the moment where the HBBTV consortium has been formally established. Under the influence of two main countries in Europe, France and Germany at the beginning. So as I said earlier, the 1.5, which is a current available version of HBBTV, supports standardized adaptive streaming. Again, the door open to high quality content on multiple devices, the management of multiple DRM, plus some other features. But again, remember what I said earlier is that some of the features of HBBTV are not part of the standard and will have to be specified by users, by content providers, by CE vendors, and usually that happens locally. So each of the main countries, for example, France with their TNT 2.0, terrestrial television 2.0, has used the HBBTV standard and has specified some of the content protection features to make sure the standard is widely supported. In Spain, they also have done this, and I've heard that, I will mention that afterwards, in Russia, there's a lot of things happening about HBBTV. And the important thing is that the HBBTV consortium is also already working on the future. Our main goal is, of course, to address all the market needs. And if you think about the presentations earlier this morning, what are the market needs? It's about always improving the quality of the content, of course. It's also completely integrating what we call the second screen or the companion screen concept, because we know that the second screen will be very important in terms of the services we will have to offer to consumers and also in terms of monetization. So HBBTV 2.0 is we are already working on how to integrate into the standard, how to synchronize services between different devices, or to, for example, as this was mentioned earlier, use some devices like tablet as not only a device on which you can also see the services, but really an intelligent second screen that can be used as a remote control for your television set, for example. Topics like advertising are also, or will also be part of the specification of HBBTV, integration with social networks and all that kind of things. So really, HBBTV is a standard which is moving very fast to integrate new features and new business models. Adoption. Who is using HBBTV? Where is it used? How well, successfully or not? So basically, it's a map of Europe first. I'll mention about HBBTV out of Europe afterwards. But basically, you see that, of course, remember, HBBTV was an initiative at the beginning coming from Germany and France. So in these countries, HBBTV is in regular operations. There are quite some very popular HBBTV services already available. But by the way, we can have a look more in details. So in Germany, there's plenty of services from broadcasters, but also service providers that are using HBBTV. And Informa Telekom published a report recently which says that in Germany, each month there is an increase of 18% of the users using HBBTV services, with approximately 1.6 million users by November 2012 in Germany. France, as I said earlier, has also launched quite a high number of HBBTV-based services. Countries like Spain are very active, Netherlands, Czech Republic, Austria, UK. So all countries where HBBTV services are in regular operations. And we see at the HBBTV consortium a very high interest of HBBTV out of Europe. There's already some trials and even services in production in South Africa, for example. And also in China, Japan, and Korea, in Asia, there's a very good traction for HBBTV. And even in the US by some cable operators. I'm still okay on time, I think, huh? I think so, huh?
I think you have 2 minutes. Maybe we can move to the Q&A.
Okay, just maybe I'm finished, by the way.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, Russia, one word of Russia, but I'm sure that in the audience, a lot of people knows more than I, but Russia, the Russian television and radio networking, broadcasting network is already currently testing HBBTV services, and we launched some pilot, although it's already done and I'm not aware of it, so please, if somebody knows more about that in the room, please don't hesitate to jump in. The HBBTV consortium, as I said earlier, created in 2010, 60 members, international coverage. The achievements, you know them, 1.0, 1.5, 2.0. HBBTV is a standard. It is all about interoperability, so we are organizing regular interoperability tests in different countries to make sure that the ecosystem builds in each region to make sure of the wide deployments of HBBTV services. To be honest, in Europe, we could conclude by saying that HBBTV is quite well adapted, lots of services. This can be considered as a bit spotty in some regions. We expect a real takeoff of HBBTV services probably by the middle of next year with a mass market somewhere between 2005 and 2016. So, conclusion, HBBTV, standard, mature technology, services already in production, a standard which really follows the consumers' and viewers' expectations in terms of features and services, simply to implement, and the door open to a lot of new business models for broadcasters, pay TV service providers, and so on. That's it. Thank you very much. Спасибо.
Thank you. Thank you. Коллеги, может быть, у кого-то есть вопросы к Xavier?
Do we have questions to Xavier? Hello, Dmitry Sinemenov, RTRS. Xavier.
I can ask on English. Do you have any expectation figures regarding the penetration of the set-top boxes and TV sets compatible with HBBTV?
Set-top box for HBBTV?
Yeah.
It's very difficult because first of all, HBBTV today is really taking off with broadcasters, and for broadcasters, having a specific set-top box for services is not easy to distribute and to enable. So, to be honest, we don't have real figures on this today, and there's not a lot of HBBTV set-top box available on the market yet. It's really connected TV oriented for now, so no figures. I also have to be honest, there are several people of my company sitting at the HBBTV consortium. There may be others that have some figures. So what I propose is that you maybe give me your business card, or you can also go to the HBBTV consortium when you can have more details, to be honest. Okay, but no figure as far as I know, for now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.